Yeah, I thought I brought water with me.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Are you good? Good. You need anything?
I met Cece Berry. I was down on Serta many years ago when we were doing the swamps parade in Samantha.
Oh, yeah.
It was a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Something.
In fact, he helped with that swamps parade when he was little in class.
All right.
They're coming back from Catalina right now.
Yeah, I know. That's the only one I didn't go on.
I get super good. Seasick. Yeah. But I said you
Yeah, I know they needed to check in for that. I know that wasn't one of the options, but no, it wasn't. They're good kids. They follow the. Yeah. That's a safer one. And the watches, you know, I did it with them.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know we haven't used it that way because I have not got the full evaluation part going, like the pre-test and post-test and stuff. Like I haven't been very consistent with using that. Pre and post-test. I do want to use like maybe I might need some help with that because I don't. I need to get a good way to like do the test ahead of time and then test after. So I've been using. Well, there's Pride, and then there's another one for the
Your presentation is actually scaled back or centered.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to show any like how to use drugs, anything like that, because the teens are going to be here. So, because for parents, we go a little more in depth. But there's a little more that's geared towards parents. Because see a lot of parents are not a whole lot of teens, so that's good. But yeah, it's just
Brief, so I'll just talk about my experiences. Pardon me.
1 2 1 2.
It's a delay. Just remember, it's like 12 seconds.
Is that stream live?
We're live.
But can I hear what's on the actual stream?
Plug it in my laptop.
Check, check.
Where are you over here?
It's down. It's down here.
hello. Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
2 or 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Wonderful.
Nice. I heard you're going to be a former resident of California, so.
Yes.
Where are you going? Both my children now live in Dallas, Texas. And Marilyn and I were looking for a second property there. I can't leave the county. I'm sad to be here. But as soon as I am done here, whatever day that is, we will live there 183 days a year. 50% plus one. I'll leave years on that.
How are you? Let me introduce you, Tony Roberts. How are you doing?
Yes.
Ready? Yeah.
There you go. How about that? Okay. Is that we want to listen to our parents in terms of leveraging relationships that they may have and opportunities to have guest speakers come and talk to our families about critical issues that impact our kids, and not just our kids, but our neighbors' kids. And this is one such example. Carl Nolette approached me approximately about 3 weeks ago. And not that I hadn't heard of fentanyl, but he sent to me a very impactful text talking about a young person who lost his life recently in Orange County. And it was all tied to fentanyl. And he said, what are we doing at JSerra? I said, well, we're focused on how do we best protect our kids. And he said, well, how do we get the word out to our parents? I said, good, let's use this as an opportunity to leverage the relationships. And then he said, well, Tony, I've got some contacts at the sheriff's department. I said, okay, who do you know there? That's a good start. It's a great start. So with that in mind, I want to thank the Nolettes for bringing this not only to our attention, but to allow us the opportunity to share the word, because hopefully what you'll do with this is you'll take it to your friends and not only to your kids, share the word, because fentanyl is one issue today. There are other issues that will come up for the rest of our lives, okay? And we want to share the words so that we protect our kids. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Carl Nolette. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. Thank you. I love it. It's more and more coming. I'm going to be very brief because it's all about the sheriff, and it's all about the program. It's all about this unfortunate issue that we're having here, not only in Orange County, but around in the United States. So the sheriff that you see here is the 13th elected sheriff coroner in Orange County. He started in 2018. He's got about 4,000 of wonderful deputies around him to protect 800,000 of our citizens in this county. And he's a wonderful man. I've known many of the sheriffs before. We've been very involved with drug use, life abuse as a family. Our president, Bill Aldine, who's sitting in the back, he's been involved for, gosh, over 20-some plus years, helping the county, helping us as a family, connecting and making sure that drug use, life abuse is at the forefront of our thinking. We have an incredible guy right here that I can actually call a friend. That is wonderful. Doesn't help with speeding tickets, I'll tell you that right now up front. But a lot of friends always ask, so can you just call the sheriff and say, can you get rid of this? Doesn't work that way. Pay the ticket, it's your fault. That's his attitude. So I'm going to give it up to the sheriff right here. Please, thank you, Don Barnes.
Thank you very much, and thanks for taking time out of your schedule. My hope after hearing the information we're going to share with you is if you wanted to know if this might be worth your time, we're going to make sure that you realize the risks that exist and why it might be worth your time. As the sheriff of Orange County, large county and nationally 5th largest sheriff's department in the nation, and I've been screaming from the rooftops since about 2015 on fentanyl. I have a internationally accredited crime lab, but we recognize the presence of fentanyl for the first time west of the Mississippi back in 2016. Fentanyl, if you don't know what fentanyl is, just real quick, and Sergeant Gunsoli runs our drug programs, we'll go into more detail, but fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin, 100 times more potent than morphine that you might get in a hospital setting. And we're seeing now derivatives and synthetics of fentanyl coming into our nation that are carfentanil, for example, another synthetic that is 100 times more potent than fentanyl, which is 50 times more potent than heroin. It's now laced in about every single thing, and this is really the risk that we're going to talk about today, is that young adults, teens, experimenting with narcotics or drug use are really playing Russian roulette with what they're putting into their bodies. Because you cannot take anything that might be resembling some other narcotic that probably, if it's not, unless it's from a pharmaceutical source, it's probably clandestine produced south of the border by the drug cartels and more than likely has no pharmaceutical qualities in it. The only intoxicating substance will be fentanyl. And it's frightening. I will let you know that we have not stopped. I've been trying for the last 6 years to get legislation passed in the state to add fentanyl to the same enhanced penalties for trafficking sales as heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine. And every year it gets rejected by the Public Safety Committee in the state of California. It's actually an oxymoron to call in the Public Safety Committee when they do anything but keep the public safe is not helping our young adults. Last year, for the first time in our nation's history, we had 107,000 drug-related deaths in the nation, the highest it's ever been. Of those, 2/3 were fentanyl-related. Let you know the trend that we're experiencing. If you go back to 2013, CDC puts out information that shows the causal or the main substance in a individual's system related to drug-related deaths. In 2013, in the population of the United States, 4% of those who died from a drug-related death, 4%, 4 out of 100, was related to fentanyl. 2018, just a few years later, 40% were related to fentanyl. This last year, almost 70% related to fentanyl. It is the largest public health crisis, public safety crisis that we are experiencing. If not for COVID-19, this would be the issue that we would be talking about. And I am, first of all, thankful to you for coming out and being here today and learning more about this. So I shared the statistics. Here's the frightening statistic for you parents, and especially for you young adults in the room who have kids. Have friends, to share this message with them. Between 2019 and 2020, deaths among teens, adolescents, rose 94%. That's almost doubling of teens dying from drug-related deaths, another 24% last year, and of those, 77% were fentanyl-related. And we're not stopping. I have 6 different narcotics programs in the Orange County Sheriff's Department. I say this because through budget cuts and staffing shortages from other municipal agencies, a lot of other police departments don't even have narcotics teams anymore because of legislative changes, Prop 47, the decriminalization of narcotics from felonies to misdemeanors. They just don't see it as worth the investment of people, of officers, to put out there to try to curb the drug trafficking and the drug sales and drug use because it's so prolific. It's really devastating. We have a north narcotics team, a street team, a south narcotics street team. I have a highway interdiction team. Anybody who drive to San Diego and see the Orange County Sheriff's vehicles that are down by the checkpoint, those are our highway interdiction team. They get drugs coming north on the 5 freeway. They get guns and money going south back to the cartels. The 5 and the 15 freeway, by the way, there's 2 major drug corridors into this country. It's our south border in San Diego, coming north to us, and going west to the rest of the country through Orange County and the Southern California area, and the Laredo, Texas is the other large areas that are being trafficked in. I have a parcel interdiction team that works at John Wayne Airport, catching narcotics being sent through the mail and other postal services. We have a majors team, that's the high intensity drug trafficking area known as a HIDA, in Orange County that works the cartels and the major drug trafficking. And a lot of people forget that we have a western border, the Pacific Ocean. We actually, on contract with the federal government, patrol the ocean, the waterways, on behalf of our federal partners in a boat. I call it the Go Fast boat. It will go as fast as the conditions on the water will let it go. We do interdictions on behalf of the federal government as designated task force officers that make entry onto boats and pleasure craft and catch ponga boats coming up from south of the border. And this happens routinely. So much so, and just to scare you a little more, just in the first few months of this year, we seized, just the sheriff's department, 205 pounds of fentanyl, pure fentanyl to date, and another 143,000 illicitly produced pills that contain fentanyl. Pills that may resemble or stamped to look like Xanax, OxyContin, oxycodone, and things that young adults unknowingly will purchase through what we call Drug Hub, which is through Snapchat, will order up narcotics, have them delivered just like a pizza to the curb, young kids picking them up, consuming them, and this is the frightening thing for parents in the room of these kids when those who lose their lives, and there were plenty of them last year, 3 out of 4 parents find their young child deceased in the bedroom the morning after they consumed a narcotic. This is serious. And the one question I'll leave you with, and one question, actually two. The first one is, I get asked routinely, is why would the cartels kill off their clients? Why would they kill drug users? And it's not intentional. For those who remember marketing in college, it's a loss leader to them. They're more focused on creating future addicts through the distribution of narcotics than they are about the few people they lose along the way. And by the way, when I talked about laced, we're seeing marijuana-laced fentanyl now. So if you think you're buying something that might just be marijuana, it's designed to create addiction. And so when I talk about those who lose their lives, I ask the question this way. For those in the room, and I know I'm talking to parents, who here has kids? Right? Do you remember the first time you made chocolate chip cookies with your kids when they were little? Can we agree that the chocolate chip dispersion ratio cookie to cookie was not consistent? One chocolate chip cookie had 3 chocolate chips, the next one had 13, because they're kids. Well, those are the cartels. They're making chocolate chip cookies. Some cookies have 1/5 the fentanyl, and some cookies have 5 times the fentanyl. So you can very easily take a pill the first time and say, that did make me feel a little good, because that's the way narcotics work. It changes the system and how it operates. And the next time you take it, that's the bullet in the chamber in that Russian roulette. And you take it and you flatline and you're gone forever. So the risk is significantly different than it used to be back in the day. For the young adults in the room, the kids, raise your hand to this question. Who here wants to be a drug addict when you grow up? Well, that's a loaded question. And the problem is that's not how life works. And Sergeant Gunsley is going to go through some of the ways that narcotics impacts your system. And for those who recently took science, you remember what homeostasis is, right? Homeostasis is that the equal how your body operates, blood pressure, your heart rate, all of those things. When you start working with or testing narcotics, it changes the way your body operates by implementing or ingesting synthetics that change your synapse and replaces natural substances like endorphins with substitutes. And the reason I asked about who here wants to be a drug addict, because I've been doing this, I'm on my 34th year, and I've met a lot of good people who lost their lives and lost their futures to drug addiction. Over time, this is the harsh reality. Drug addicts, they'll tell you when they get addicted, they're not trying to get high anymore. They're trying to get back to normal. They're trying to get homeostasis back into equilibrium so that they can just feel normal again, because that's what narcotics will do to rewire your system. The last question I have for the parents in the room, who can tell me what the Fourth Amendment is? Anyone? It's unreasonable search and seizure. That's what the Fourth Amendment is. It's unreasonable search and seizure without affidavit and warrant for persons to be searched and things to be seized. This is the important part for parents in the room. The Fourth Amendment does not apply to you. It applies to government. And I say that because I really am tired of hearing people say, mothers, fathers, if I only knew what was in my kid's bedroom, if I only knew what was in their backpack, if I only knew what they were doing on their phone. By the way, as a child under 18, you cannot legally possess property. It's actually the property of your parents that they give they allow the use of. So when I say that, get in your kids' stuff. Go through their rooms, go through their backpacks, find out who their friends are, because I do not want to hear one more time a parent come up to me and say, I lost my child, these are the circumstances, and if I only knew who they're involved with, what they were doing, who they're communicating with, I would have done it totally different, because we are losing lives. And by the way, when I talk about losing lives, we're talking about doubling. It's doubled almost every year, and it's going to get exponentially worse as we go forward. So I want to really thank you and applaud you for being here to learn some of the skills and some of the risks that are going to be passed on by Sergeant Gunsall in his presentation. And when he's done, we're both going to stick around and we'll answer questions. And there's no question off the table. I like to call it Stump the Sheriff. I've never been stumped. This is important to me. I'm glad to see that's important to you, because we are losing a whole generation of our kids to this crisis of fentanyl. So thank you very much. I'll introduce Sergeant Brian Gunsall to come up. He's going to do a presentation.
All right, good evening, everyone. Obviously, the sheriff is doing a lot to combat this issue of fentanyl and drug use in general. But we've also had a war on drugs for 40 years, and the problem doesn't seem to be getting any better, right? So education helps with the demand for drugs. We do enforcement. We're trying to do our best to throw money at the problem and try and stop it. But really what we need to do is get the community educated as far as what to look for and how to protect your kids, so that you don't end up being a victim to something like fentanyl. So fentanyl became popular after oxycodone was, oxycodone was put out into our society by doctors who were misled, who were told that that oxycodone was not addictive, right? And so a lot of people, they were giving it out when for things like headaches and for minor pain, when they should have been putting it out, prescribing it for something more serious than that, right? So a lot of people ended up getting hooked on oxycodone. But what happened was, when the federal government finally started saying, hey, this stuff is more potent and more addictive than we thought, then they started putting regulations on it, and that created this void, which then fentanyl is coming in and filling. Okay, so we have these people who are addicted out there, good people, but now fentanyl is kind of coming in and saying, hey, the drug traffickers are trafficking that in to fill that addiction, right? So we have this demand in America for opioids, and fentanyl is just filling that demand. So we want the next generation to not be, addicted to this stuff, right? We stop that demand, and we do that through education. So tonight we're going to talk about the crisis in Orange County so that you're aware of it. You can protect your kids and make sure that fentanyl, just because it's so potent, we're seeing those deaths go up. And so we'll talk about that. You can see nationally we have a problem with fentanyl. And the blue line showing how quickly it went up around 2016. And that was really when we started getting some regulation on the oxycodone and pulling it back out of society and saying, no, it needs to be prescribed for more serious pain. And now we see that fentanyl come in and start taking over on our streets. And it's illegal fentanyl. It's not stuff that's prescribed by a doctor, right? So we're seeing the fentanyl deaths in Orange County rise also since 2016. So you can see a 1,600% increase. Last year's statistics for 2021, 693 people died in Orange County officially as a result of a fentanyl-related overdose. Okay, and these are not people that wanted to die on fentanyl. These are poisonings. These are people who took a pill, took some, maybe even they were looking to get high, and they got an overdose, or they overdosed on fentanyl, but it wasn't on purpose, right? And so these are pretty much accidental overdoses. So it's now the #1 killer of our kids under the age, or 17 and under. That's taken over car accidents, drownings, all the other ways that kids die. It's now #1. Alexander Neville is a 14-year-old who died of a fentanyl overdose. His mom, Amy Neville, is very outspoken, and she's been on CNN and Fox and all the big news stations trying to spread awareness about fentanyl and how dangerous it is, and how a good mom like that she was, that she just said, hey, I was a good mom. I had a good connection with my kid. And he still overdosed. He overdosed because he was looking to get high. He was looking to experiment. And he reached out to somebody. He kind of knew somebody who was able to get him a pill. He tried it, and then he ended up getting hooked. And he had tried it a couple times, and he went to his mom and said, you know what, this stuff, I'm hooked on this. I'm hooked on opioids, essentially. And so he actually went to his mom because she has a good relationship with him, and he was able to disclose it and say, I need help for this. At 14, he's able to realize he had a problem. So she said, okay, you know what, we're going to get you some help. And they set up an appointment for the next day to go and talk to an addiction specialist and figure out what to do about it. Well, in an addict's brain, what that means is, hey, this is my last night of being sober. And what did he do? He got on Snapchat and he ordered a pill. And what he thought he was getting was not fentanyl. He did not order fentanyl. He ordered something else, a Percocet or an oxycodone or something else. And he ended up getting that pill, meeting someone out on the street. They delivered it to his neighborhood. He then took that pill, and then she found him the next morning. The day to wake him up to go to that meeting, she found him dead in his room. Fentanyl is a highly addictive and deadly synthetic opioid analgesic used by the medical professionals to treat severe pain. It is now being sold illegally on the streets for people to get high. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. It's being sold as a counterfeit pill for the most part. It can also be sold as a powder form, but the way our kids are getting it is typically in the pill form. Okay, so the M30s is very popular. That's what we're finding a lot of. M30s is like oxycodone. Okay, so it's being disguised as that. These are not legitimate pills. But because people are used to pills, used to taking pills, when they get it from somebody, a friend, they get it from a street dealer, somebody, they see this pill, it looks legitimate, they take it assuming that it's just like the one that they've had before, and then they're actually getting a lethal dose. Just so you know, illicit fentanyl is not the same drug you get from a doctor or a pharmacist, right? So if you're getting a drug that's prescribed to you that's fentanyl, that's different. Doctors actually prescribe fentanyl in micrograms, not in milligrams. Okay, so micrograms is 1/1,000,000th of a gram. So very small amounts, right, when you're prescribed by a doctor, and it's regulated. We know how much is in those pills or in that patch. And so that's very different when you're getting it from a doctor than you're getting it from the streets. So pill seizures have been on the rise. This is the first 3 quarters of 2021. It shows how quickly the pills, the dealers switched over to pills in our county, right, because of its success rate. It's so successful that people are really, willing to try the pill because, they're familiar, they do the job, right? They're packaged, and someone gets that pill and they're like, okay, I like that pill. I'm going to get another one of those pills. And so they go and just keep ordering another pill. It was so successful for their business model that they just ended up, switching over to the pill form, and that shows in our confiscations. So Narcan, this is our Narcan deployments. And so Narcan is an opioid reversal drug that we carry with us. So all of our patrol and our jail deputies carry it. I carry it with me. And it's a nasal spray that we spray into the nose, and it reverses the effects. So when someone overdoses on fentanyl, it suppresses the breathing. So they either can't breathe effectively or they stop breathing entirely. Okay, and so what this does is you can spray this in their nose. It'll circulate. It usually takes a couple of minutes, but then it'll start allowing them to breathe more effectively. Okay, sometimes it takes several doses depending on how much that person ingested. And you can see how it's increased 1,200% in our deployments, how much we're using this now to save lives out in the streets. So that's just another indicator of how bad it's gotten in Orange County. So fentanyl, all you need is 2 milligrams for a lethal dose, and you can see what a small amount that is, right? And that's why it's so deadly, because you just don't need very much. And we're talking about teenagers getting their hands on this. 2 milligrams is enough to kill an adult person. What about a teenager that just bodies are smaller, right? And so they don't need as much. So how this works is when the drug dealers or the cartels make these pills, they basically take fentanyl powder, they mix it in with a binding agent, which is just kind of an inert binding to make a pill stick together, and then they put it into a pill press and crank out these pills. They can stamp it, you know, they have their production that they make these pills that look legitimate. And like the sheriff mentioned, the cookie dough analogy, I have it in here. You have like a mixture of pill, you know, the dough is the inert binding agent, and then you add the chocolate chips, which is your fentanyl, right? Mix it up, and then you crank out these pills. And you can see someone might go and buy this pill that only has a small amount of fentanyl in it. They get high off of it. They go, you know what, that's great. I'm going to get another pill. They go to the same dealer. They get another pill, maybe even from the same batch, and then they get this one. And we can see how a fentanyl overdose or poisoning occurs because that next pill has a lethal dose. So teens today are getting it off of social media. Amy Neville, that's the lady in the front there. She's the one whose son died, the 14-year-old that died. She's been going out and protesting in front of Snapchat because that's where he purchased his pill. And she's trying to get them to do something to stop the sales of drugs on Snapchat. And they're starting to do something. They're cracking down a little bit, but the drug dealers, I'm finding out, I just talked to our social media specialist and said that they're starting to usurp even the changes that Snapchat is putting in place. So they're finding a way to get to teenagers, and they do it through the contacts. So they contact one kid who's using drugs, and then through the contacts they reach out to all of those, because they know if kids are using drugs, they usually hang out with other drug users, right? And now they've got that whole group that they can start selling to. So they're finding ways to get around the things that Snapchat is trying to do to put in place to stop it.
Sophia says buying drugs is as easy as sending the right emoji to a so-called plug, a dealer who finds customers on apps like Snapchat.
I'm looking for a little plug emoji or like a fire emoji or just whatever emoji the normal dealers I have. They're like, yo, hit my line for gas. And then you're like, yo, you got whatever, like slang terms for whatever.
And it can happen that fast, just by communicating on Snapchat and by searching with the right emoji.
If you know where to go, it's really easy.
It's a terrifying new playbook for drug dealing. Now so common, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency releasing this cheat sheet for parents and guardians showing the emojis commonly used to buy drugs on social media.
I cannot emphasize enough how deadly this drug is to human life, especially to unsuspecting youth in our community. These pills are widely available and are often sold for dollars a piece on social media.
And pictures showcasing how counterfeit pills they've seized from drug dealers look eerily similar to the real medications doctors prescribe. Just days ago, Snapchat issuing a statement detailing their efforts to flush out drug-related content and announcing steps to curb illegal activity, saying they have zero tolerance for the promoting of illegal drugs on their platform.
So Amy's still putting pressure on them because they're not quite doing enough to protect kids. And so we all just need to make sure that we're monitoring our kids' Snapchats, especially if you suspect drug use might be involved, because that's where they're getting their drugs right now. Snapchat, some on Instagram, but mostly Snapchat. Okay. Signs of an opioid overdose. Since we are talking about fentanyl here, if you suspect any type of drug use going on, then you have to be concerned about fentanyl, because all drugs, fentanyl is being added to all drugs, okay? So here's the signs of an opioid overdose. Small constricted pinpoint pupils. Falling asleep or loss of consciousness. Slow or shallow breathing, that's ineffective. Choking or gurgling sounds, limp body, pale, blue, or cold skin. Dark skin may appear gray and light skin may appear blue. So if someone is unconscious or not responding, then you may want to suspect that maybe they got a fentanyl pill. So how do you respond to that? Well, you have to get medical services there right away. Okay, this is a medical emergency. So you call 911. Administer Narcan. If you suspect that there's drug use or there might be opioid use going on, then get Narcan. You can get it at a pharmacy, and you need to have it in the house. Okay. What's that? Over the counter. Yeah, you can. Well, I think you have to talk to the pharmacy about it, the pharmacist, but you can get it at the pharmacy. Assist with breathing. Did you have a question? Oh, very good. Okay. And so that's new information. It's great information, and I'll spread the word too about that. I don't think we have it as far as a police department available. Maybe not yet, but I will certainly look into that. If that's something that's being widely distributed, then we certainly want to have that on hand, and so we'll look into that. Thank you for that. Yeah, because I don't know that they're going to have it, but the fire department might be a good place, or yeah. Okay, so and then obviously if there's no heartbeat, then start CPR, and we got to get medical services there right away. Okay, and then here's the thing: liability laws. A lot of people are like, well, what if a friend or somebody overdoses, and what's the liability involved in trying to save someone's life? There is laws on the books that say no person who in good faith and not for compensation renders emergency medical or non-medical care at the scene of an emergency shall be liable for any civil damages resulting from the act or omission. So it means help someone, help them out, right? And there's no civil liability, And there's also another one that came about because of these overdoses. Many years ago, we had some bodies that were being kind of dumped because the person overdosed, they died, and then they were taken from where they overdosed and dumped someplace else because the people who were with that person when they died, they didn't want to get in trouble, right, with law enforcement. So this is actually a law that was generated from parents here in Orange County. And what it is if you are in a party kind of atmosphere and people are using drugs and someone overdoses, you can call 911 and not worry about criminal charges. So the police department will come, they will help save a life, they will probably collect the drugs and then confiscate them, but no one's going to get charged with the crime as long as it's for a medical emergency. Okay. So we want to make sure that people are getting the medical help that they need when they're overdosing. Okay. So tips on handling drugs. So if you find drugs, beware that fentanyl is transdermal, which means it can go through your skin. From what we understand, though, is that a lot of our police officers and deputies have handled it accidentally, not realizing that it was positive for fentanyl, and they didn't have an overdose. So if you happen to handle something, don't freak out. Don't use alcohol. Okay, because alcohol will open up the pores and cause it to go into your body. Just wash it off with soap and water, and of course monitor yourself if you start to feel, dizzy or something. Then you want to call 911 and get some help on the way. Yes.
So, question: Army West Point football, that incident a couple months ago where the overdose
Yeah, I haven't seen or heard a lot of that happening. So what I have heard of it happening, but it is possible. It makes sense that if someone is using fentanyl, especially if they're using it as far as the powder form and they're sniffing it or something, it's going to be on and around their face, and then you're doing mouth to mouth on them, you could get exposed to it. So I think that is a concern, and you have to be careful. If you don't know why that person is down, then you could get something. It could be due to a fentanyl overdose. It could be a heart attack. We don't know what it is, right? Until medical gets there and does an assessment. So calling 911, getting somebody in route, and then doing what you can to help save that person's life. If they're having trouble breathing, repositioning them into a better breathing position might be what you want to do. If you can get Narcan or someone with Narcan there to spray it in their nose, then that'll help reverse the effects and have more effective breathing. But when you're handling these drugs, you just want to make sure that you're putting on gloves. If you end up putting it into a plastic bag, they put it in the bag, and then you might think about just kind of burping that bag to get the air out and then sealing it. Well, when you do that, you're going to get a whiff of it, right? It's going to go right into your eyes and nose and stuff, and so you could end up poisoning yourself. So we want to be real careful with handling this stuff. It can go into your eyes and nose. It can be absorbed through your skin. Okay. The developing brain is more vulnerable to addiction, right, than the adult brain. And so for young people in the room, just know that it's about brain development. Do you know when your brain fully develops? Anybody? Yeah, about mid-20s. So we know that there's studies out there that show that teens who start drinking before the age of 15 are 6 times more likely to develop a dependency problem with alcohol than if they had just waited to 21 years of age. And even better, wait till 25, right? When your brain is fully developed, then you're even less vulnerable. So that brain development is really, really important aspect of things. So the strategy for parents is harm reduction, right? We don't want to offer alcohol to our kids in our home and say, hey, I'd rather them be drinking in our home than drinking out someplace else. The addiction is really still the problem because of that young developing brain, that they're just so vulnerable to addiction that we have to just slow down that use or stop it entirely if you can, right? The experimentation typically is going to happen anyway, and so we have to be that person who's slowing it or stopping it from happening, right? That harm reduction, so that addiction doesn't take hold. I do want to say that statistically, most teens are not using. A lot of times we show statistics showing how many teens are using. The truth is that's actually a smaller percentage than what are most. So most teens are not using drugs and alcohol. So that's a good thing. So for you teens, if you want to be like most teens, then don't use drugs or alcohol, right? But it seems like because we have people around us that are using, it seems like there's more using than what really is going on. So suggestions for parents to reducing that use. Drug use occurs where denial and inaction exist. So denial is a big part, right? Denial by the parent, denial by the kids, denial by everybody around that person saying, no, it's not happening here, it's not a problem yet. And so if we don't take action when we suspect it, then it's just going to continue to get worse, okay? And we allow addiction to occur, and that potential eventual, they'll get their hands maybe on a fentanyl pill. If you suspect drug use, look for evidence, right? Drug test. So drug testing is, you can get these drug tests at a pharmacy, they're over the counter. Drug tests also help teens to say no to their friends, right? So if their parents are regularly drug testing them, just randomly doing a test, just say, hey, I'm just going to make sure that you have a reason to say no. And you do the drug test and it comes up negative, great, just keep doing it. And that's going to keep them safe because they know that they're being tested.
Are you tested specifically alcohol,
Yes, so the drug tests typically have multiple test strips in them, like this one here, and it's a urine test. You can also do, if you suspect that there's ongoing drug use, you can do a hair test. Take a piece of hair and send it into a lab, and then the lab will look at it historically and see what what the person has been using. Okay, so you get a little more. The urine test is more for like right now what's in their system. I want to search room. So if you suspect that there's drug use, look for the evidence, right? Search the room, backpacks, car, cell phone. Cell phone is, everything leads to the cell phone, right? The drug dealing's going on in the cell phone. The pictures of any drug use are going to be in there. Text to friends, that kind of stuff. It's all on the cell phone. So getting that cell phone is important. Doing a spot check from time to time will help you understand what's going on. We're talking about a time of fentanyl, right? We don't have time to fix this problem like we used to, right? There used to be a time where, hey, they're starting to use marijuana. Okay, let's start working on reducing the use of marijuana. Let's fix this problem. Well, now if they're willing to try something, they may be willing to get a pill from a friend, and that pill may be a deadly pill. We're just living in a time of fentanyl. We don't have time like we used to. So addiction starts as a choice that becomes a disease. Many good people have gotten addicted to something, to substances, alcohol, right? So it's something that we as humans are vulnerable to. Okay. Don't assume this problem will go away on its own. It progressively gets worse, so it requires taking action. And start with your healthcare provider. It's very simple. Go to your doctor and find out, what can I do? What resources do I have available to me? And what network do I have that can help me deal with this problem? Because as a parent dealing with addiction issues in your child, or potential addiction issues, you're going to have, it's going to be a long road. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a long battle, and you need support. Okay. Consult an addiction specialist would be another recommendation. Someone who knows about this and how this will play out, and what you need to do now to get a handle on it. And then if you suspect that there's any drug use going on, that it might lead to an opioid use, get Narcan and have that in the house and be ready to go, okay, while you're dealing with managing this problem, okay? And then we just ask that if you know of any drug dealing that's going on, someone who's selling drugs, you can go on occrimestoppers.org and put in any information that you have. You can even do it anonymously, and then our narcotics teams will start to work on it. Right, and we'll gather as much information as we can and try and build a case to stop them. Sometimes we'll have somebody who's like in the neighborhood, they have a lot of people coming all night long, and they're just kind of selling drugs out of that house. And then OC Crime Stoppers, someone puts that in. It may take a little while. They have to build that case up, and then all of a sudden that house gets hit and it gets shut down. So it may seem like nothing's happening, but the narcotics teams do get that information and start working on it right away. If you want to learn more information, these are great websites to learn anything. I recommend that you keep yourself kind of updated on all types of drugs if you have teenagers at home. They do experiment, right? That's just a time when they're just kind of doing their own thing. Hey, I want to see what this is like. I want to see what it's, maybe their friends are using, and they introduce it to them. When drug use occurs, it doesn't happen like someone is pushing this on them, right? It's a mutual choice. They're sitting around, hey, you want to try some pot? Yeah, I think I will. I'll try some pot. And so they do it, voluntarily, okay? Most drug addicts or narcotics addicts that we talked to said they started with marijuana, okay? So marijuana, even though it's legalized in California for 21 years of age and older, doesn't mean it's safe. And it's for the young developing brain, it's something that is kind of a starter drug for them. So if there is marijuana use going on, you need to be very concerned about that, because that means that they're now surrounding themselves with other kids who are using marijuana, because non-users tend not to want to hang out with users. And so they find that circle of friends. And if you suspect that you may be in denial and say, hey, my kid's not using, but all of their friends are. You need to suspect that maybe your kid is also. Okay, so just what I've noticed, in 24 years of doing this job, is that denial is real, and that we don't want to believe that about our kids, but we should. We should see other signs and symptoms, and we should take action so that we can protect them. Okay. Yeah, so the M30 pills is the biggest one where the fentanyl is found. all drugs, our crime lab has found that all drugs that are confiscated and submitted to them have had fentanyl added to them. Not that every time they get a drug submission that it's got fentanyl in it, but they are finding it in all drugs that are being at some point. So methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, all the ones that you wouldn't think to find fentanyl in it, fentanyl is being added. So there's no safe, drug use. Even in marijuana, if they're getting it from the streets, there may be fentanyl added to try and enhance the high that they're going to get from that. We also see polydrug use, which means that they're mixing to see what kind of high they're going to get. A lot of these people who use fentanyl, they're actually looking for fentanyl online. They get it to get high. They'll even ask the drug dealer and say, hey, will this kill me? Is this safe? And they're like, yeah, I haven't killed anybody yet. And you're like, okay, I'll have one. And so they get this pill, and they just don't realize that it's Russian roulette, right? That the other pills that may have been sold previously, obviously we did not kill someone, but this one they're getting is going to kill them. And they just don't know it. They're just going on what a drug dealer is telling them, right? What's that? Yeah, you just don't know. Each pill is different, right? And it's not being made by a pharmaceutical company with legitimate quality controls in place. What it's being made is in a big vat or big bucket, where they're just mixing these ingredients and stirring it with a stick, and then they're making them with a pill press. And that's why each one of these pills is different. And you just don't know which one is lethal until you find somebody who died of it, or you test it. Yes. Good question. I don't know of it being found in any vaping. I have not found that it's been in vaping. The problem with vaping, though, is nicotine. Nicotine for a teenager can prime their brain for addiction, right? So again, it's an addictive substance, and vaping, teens love vaping right now, and they're smoking marijuana out of it, marijuana oils, and these nicotine and nicotine salts, which are more potent than just kind of the general nicotine that you get from the nicotine plant. And so it's highly addictive, and what it does is it just primes that brain for addiction and other drugs. Okay, so it's almost like, once you give yourself permission to get high or to use an addictive substance, then it opens it up to other substances, and it just puts them more at risk. Yeah. Yes.
Sergeant, just a personal story.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good friend of mine, his wife would not test their kids because she said, I trust them until they show that they shouldn't be trusted. And I got the idea to turn off the toilet. And the kid in the morning would go to the bathroom and say, Mom, my toilet doesn't flush. And test, and the second time around, tested positive. So there's an idea of if you're afraid of telling your kid you're going to be tested, that might be a way.
Yeah, and I put out on social media, we put out a how to search your room tutorial, and for parents, right? So how to search a room. So we just went through, did a methodical search of the room. And what it was is just to bring awareness that, hey, we live in a time of fentanyl, and if you suspect it, then take a look in there. Find out what's going on with your child, because you need to protect them. They don't have a fully developed brain, right? Their prefrontal cortex is not there, the logic system. You are their prefrontal cortex, and so you have to be that logic system for them. You have to look through that room, find out what's going on. If you suspect it, you're suspecting it for a reason. And don't go into denial and assume everything's okay. Take a look. Look inside that room. A lot of people were upset with that video because they thought, oh, you're going to ruin trust with my kid, that kind of thing. Do this if you want to destroy your relationship. I understand that, but we also seem to look at things like black and white, right? You either have trust or you don't. Well, can you search a room and still have trust with your kid? I think we can, right? We do it because we love them. We do it because we care for them. That's why we're searching the room. And if we can sell it that way, then maybe we can find out what's going on with them and save their life, right? They don't know how to stop the issue, right? They're hooked on it. And And this stuff is so powerful that they can get hooked. The first time they use it, they could get hooked and just want to keep getting it. The Neville boy who, he got hooked, and he had only tried it a couple times, but he did start with marijuana. And Amy didn't really get on it when he was using the marijuana, but when he got switched over to the other things, then obviously it got very serious, and she was trying to get a handle on it, and it was a time of fentanyl. So she wasn't able to really get the help in time, to save her son. So important that we all take action if you suspect it. Otherwise, just talk to your kids about the dangers of this stuff, right? Prevention. Let's talk about it. Let's share this information with others and just say, hey, this is really going around in our community. It's extremely deadly, and the only way you're going to know that you have a safe pill is if you get it from a pharmacy, okay, and prescribed to you. All right, well, thank you so much. Hope that was helpful.
Sergeant Gunsoli is obviously very well informed and knows this stuff. What he's not sharing with you is he spent the last several years developing a appropriate drug intervention training program for teaching our 5th and 6th grade kids. It's called Above the Influence. We just had the first year of piloting it. It's very difficult through COVID, but he's implemented that. We have several deputies that teach on that platform. I'm so proud of the work that he's done that I was recently back in Washington, D.C. and spoke to the drug czar, ONDCP, Office of National Drug Control Policy, and shared the platform that he's created. I think will become a national model for how to teach our kids about choices. The Scared Straight programs don't work that we may have grown up with about scaring kids away from narcotics. That doesn't work, because what happens, as Sergeant Gunsoli had shared, is we scare these children and our kids and say, you do this, you die, and then they try something and they don't, and they say, well, you lied to me, I feel better, and I'm going to do it again because I don't trust that you're giving me accurate information. And it's that 3rd or 4th or 5th pill that will do it. So what Sergeant Gunsoli created is a life choices curriculum for kids. This is what's going to happen. This is what you can expect how to feel. And over time, this is the manifestation of poor choices, and deal with coping mechanisms and how to outreach if you are suicidal, and all these different aspects that he's built into this 6-week program for kids. And we're going to junior high kids next and developing a program specific for that age group, and then high school after that for that group as well. And I think he has done a phenomenal job and cares tremendously for your kids and what he's created. So I don't know if there are any other questions for either one of us. We don't want to leave you without the opportunity to have any questions answered that you may have. I will share with you, I'm sorry, let me share this one thing, ma'am. The story that Sergeant Gunsoli shared, I've been in juvenile programs throughout my career, and I love the opportunities we have to pick kids up and dust them off and get them back on their feet. What he shared about the drug testing, even who I am with my kids, my daughter, I pulled her in one day and said, go pee in a cup. And she cried and bawled and teared up, and it was, had just this you don't trust me response, which you may have with your kids. And when she was done, I tested, it came back negative, and I looked at her and said, I've just now gave you the perfect excuse, because I'm going to test you, and just be aware. I'm glad that I didn't have a suspicion that you were using. But going forward now, and she told me later, she said, I would be some places and somebody may be doing something. She said, you know who my dad is? You know how big he is? Well, I cannot do this because I get random drug tested. It was the greatest excuse for her to use throughout the remainder of her life. And so I would highly recommend to use that strategy if you choose to. Yes, ma'am.
It can be added to anything. It just depends on who's making it, where they're getting it from. If someone is growing their own marijuana and they're making it edible at home, obviously we know that's going to be, it's not going to have it added. So, but if you,
All these like places that sell all that stuff.
yeah, so they may not be selling it intentionally. It depends on where they're getting it, right? They may have fentanyl in it, but they may not know it. So that's the problem, with getting it at dispensaries, because they're not necessarily well regulated to be able to know what they're selling, right? They're selling products that they're getting from somewhere else, and a lot of that stuff is just not well regulated.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing to that? When you talk about the marijuana industry, when you look at drug trafficking, for example, fentanyl, it's cheaper to produce, easier to traffic. It's not seasonal like opium that you'd have, so it's really become the easiest thing to traffic. But when we look at drug trafficking on a national level, or at least locally, we're seeing methamphetamine by weight is still the largest trafficked drug, and from the Middle East and from south of the border. Cocaine production is back up because of changes in the government construct of Colombia and South America. All these things are still happening. What we're not seeing, though we saw the greatest decline in, is trafficking of marijuana, because the cartels grow it here legally. If you think that the cartels are going to give up this multi-million-dollar industry to decriminalization efforts of the California legislature, they just now don't have to traffic it. They produce it here within our state. They've taken out the middleman. And so if you don't think that they're still going to do things like try to create addictive qualities within the narcotics that they're growing here locally, that's not going to happen. It's still going to be there. So, sorry, what's the question, Bill?
Sheriff, you brought up earlier, not to get into politics tonight, but Sacramento, and because I know you spend a lot of time up there, what is wrong with our politicians of making this more?
Well, so the question was in Sacramento from the legislatures, what's happening there with the efforts to abate, I guess, the drug issues. And it goes back several years, and there is a desire, or at least there's an apprehension that might have any law or bill passed that would result in incarceration. So we talk about, and this is not, by the way, I'm not talking about drug users with the legislation I proposed, the bills we've written and sponsored by, carried by legislators. It's only on drug traffickers, the dealers and the traffickers. And so it has no impact. In fact, the goal is to slow down the trafficking of fentanyl in a way that we can start getting ahead of the curve rather than be responsive to it. I was just up in Sacramento a few months ago on a bill that we sponsored again on the same legislation. And I basically told them, I said, you're advocating for the loss of life, and you're actually advocating for drug traffickers at the expense of lost lives in California at this point. I shamed 3 of the legislators so much that they abstained their vote. And if you know how the legislature works in committee, it has to be a positive, number above. So there's one person that voted against, and one voted for, and that wasn't enough to pass the bill, and it died in committee. But that's the closest I've ever come to getting the bill out of a committee in the California legislature. It's actually very pathetic that and I gave them numbers in each of their districts. I said, this is how many people have died in your district, and this is how many people have died in your district. This increase over the last 3 years. I think that's where they couldn't deal with the impact anymore. But I've been doing this a long time, and I remember in all my different assignments that we've had people come in and they speak to city councils or wherever they're, and they'd make the comment, they want a stop sign. And they'd make the analogy, how many kids have to die before you put in the stop sign? Well, no kids have died there. This is the one circumstance where I literally want to look at my peers and say, how many kids have to die before you implement public policy that protects people from themselves? Because that's really what we're doing at this point, is trying to protect people from themselves and making better choices, or at least holding the drug traffickers accountable. Yes, sir.
I apologize, I didn't come early enough, so I missed some of this, but I'm just trying to work out in my head. I don't know much about the fentanyl, but I know it's killing people. So wouldn't it make more sense for the drug makers to make a drug that's highly addictive but doesn't kill you? I mean, this is going to, once
So yeah, I'm sure I know that you have gotten a little. That's exactly the issue. It's not the issue. The highly addictive component of it is what they're creating, with the intent to create future drug users or addicts at the expense of the few people that lose along the way to drug-related deaths.
So they're not afraid that this is going to have a kickback and it's going to.
Not at all. They are creating addicts at an exponential rate. When you look at the number of people lost, at the number of new customers they're creating, it's a business model, and they're willing to. And that's the problem we have in this country. And there's a narcotics economy that exists. It's narconomics. And if you look at just simple supply and demand. As long as there's a demand north of the border, the supply is always going to rise up south of the border or somewhere else to meet that. And we need to stop the addiction production that we have north of the border in order to start getting ahead of this. Yes, ma'am. If it's not an opioid overdose, it won't impact them at all. And so this is how it works. Another Sergeant Gunsoley mentioned Narcan, and they actually trade names naloxone. And I was a drug expert for many years. If you look at how narcotics work, fentanyl, the half-life of fentanyl is 15 minutes. And what that means is when you ingest it, 15 minutes later, it's going to be half of what it was through metabolizing the narcotic. And 15 minutes after that, it's going to be 1/4. And then at 45 minutes, it's going to be 1/8. You're trying to beat the clock to stop the impact of the fentanyl within the body. So if it's not an opioid overdose, this is an opioid antagonist or reversal. If it's not opioids, it won't harm them at all. There's no side effect of putting it in their system. What it basically does is it blocks the synapse. So the fentanyl will get in and start suppressing your breathing, as Sergeant Gunsoley had said. The naloxone will get in the way of the fentanyl and block it for a period of time until the half-life of the fentanyl subsides and it's no longer an intoxicant level. And by the way, when we're talking about the patches, for example, if you're ever given a fentanyl, not given, but somebody on a fentanyl patch, it takes 24 to 36 hours for that patch to get to a therapeutic level of pain relief. It's not immediate. That's how dangerous fentanyl is, how regulated it is, and how it's ingested in a pharmaceutical form. So we're taking that highly reduced amount over a day to get to our pain relief and then managed over time. And we're taking substances at a much larger toxic level and ingesting it at one time into the body. It's not designed to do what the drug cartels and addicts are using it for. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, you had a second question. Good. I'm sorry? The presentation?
Yeah, they're recording it, so it will be on.
Your second question. It is that, but I can tell you that in the Sheriff's Department, we've been putting out warnings to people arrested for trafficking, that if they sell in the future, the results in the death of another person, that we will seek to charge them. We just worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office. If you saw a press conference about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that they charged 3 people that we had tracked, and I have over 100 investigations ongoing for people who resulted in death that they are still working on. So we're doing everything we can to send a message that if you do this, you can be held accountable. The biggest challenge, though, with the social media platforms is the section that protects them from not being liable for user content on their platforms. And that's where it's getting a little more traction now. I said publicly that I'm going to start calling them Snapchat murders. You think I got the attention of Snapchat? That's the last thing they want in their marketing strategy, to be associated with the deaths of hundreds of people within the community, if not more. We have ways. Yes, ma'am.
Do you give this presentation? I know you said you started a program of awareness with kids. Do you give this presentation in the community to schools,
Right.
to other groups?
Yeah. So do we give this presentation to other than the schools to the community? Essentially, yes, we do. So we get out into the community. We do presentations on many different topics related to mostly what teens are using. We have a teen drug trends presentation that we do. But to all of our presentations, even if we do a cyber safety presentation or a traffic presentation, we add this fentanyl awareness to it, because it's become such a problem. But whatever, if there's something that you want for us to come back and another topic that you're interested in, reach out to me. My information's right up there. I will, if I don't have a presentation or a presenter, I will make something for you and we'll put it together. I'll do the research and we'll put a good presentation for you together and we'll come back out. I'm happy to do it. Mm-hmm. So the top drugs that teenagers are using in high school are marijuana, medication, so whatever kind of medications they have that will get them high. So nicotine, the vaping devices. They do see cigarettes, the traditional tobacco products, as worse than marijuana right now. That's their view, which is kind of interesting. Traditional tobacco cigarettes, yeah. The vaping is not considered harmful. They don't view that as a harmful thing. The students. That's the students' view. But if you, and I have a presentation on nicotine and the vaping devices, and it is very harmful. I would love to do it for your teens, to come in and talk about that, because then they'll see there's a lot of misinformation about how that they're safe or safer than tobacco, traditional tobacco, but safer doesn't mean it's safe. There's a lot of problems with it that the scientists are finding when they do the research, and we have that all in our presentation. So the other is alcohol. So those basic four things are what the kids are using. So alcohol, and those are all things: alcohol, marijuana, pills, and nicotine through vaping devices. And that's pretty much what they can get their hands on pretty easily. And what that does is it gets them into the use, which then primes their brain for that regular use of it. If they surround themselves then with other users, and then that's where fentanyl or other drugs could start being introduced that are the harder drugs, right? But it all starts with those easy to get drugs.
Yeah, and just to follow up to the question, and this is something we've been dealing with for many years, if not decades. Is oftentimes parents and many times grandparents become unknowingly the drug dealer to their children by leaving pharmaceutical issued narcotics not in a locked environment. So it's not uncommon for kids to go into their parents' medicine cabinet, see what's in there, start experimenting there. So we do drug take-back days on a regular occasion. Keep an eye out for that. If you're not following us on our social media platforms, we're easy to find, but we announce those there. If you're not using a narcotic, we highly recommend you bring it back so we can appropriately dispose of it in a way that's safe. Or if you have narcotics that you have some way to lock it in a safe or some other way, that's the most appropriate way to make sure that those are safeguarded. And I'm sorry, ma'am, you asked a question about how we find out. You're standing. This is the best thing about, I love this organization. If you see things on NCIS or CSI, I've got a team that does it, and I'm the only team in Orange County or department that has a cyber team, cyber investigators. Highly trained. The FBI is the other, but I'm more local than they are. And an example of that, if you remember back about 4 years ago, the Blaze Bernstein murder that occurred in Lake Forest, we recovered the cell phones from both Mr. Bernstein and the suspect. I won't say him by name. I refuse to recognize people who commit crime. And asked for the platform that had those phones if they would help us, and they said they would not. And we cracked those phones using some investigative techniques. And so we can get into phones. They're highly encrypted, but we can get into them, and we do that routinely. And what's best about that case is when we got into both the phones, it gave us the evidence for the hate crimes enhancements necessary against the suspect of that crime. So I've got great people, believe me.
I love your smile on that one there.
Yeah, well, I'm a blessed man. Yes, any other questions?
I want to thank the sheriff for coming, thanking Sergeant as well. Definitely clap.
Thank you.
Family, we believe in see something, do something, so that will help the sheriff and all of us out too. You can ask my lovely daughter sitting up the front, Lily, right there. She gets drug tested all the time. What does your dad say? Do you remember that?
About like our drug test?
Yes, it's trust but verify. And she looks at me with her beautiful eyes. She goes, Dad, I don't do it. I said, just want to verify. And that's it. And you just do it as parents. It's not because I'm better in any way, shape, or form. You just have to do it. And only give them an out right there to hopefully get ahead of it if anything ever happens. So thank you both for coming. I know the next time we're going to have a couple hundred more. We're going to have a whole auditorium full. This was 3 weeks' notice. I'm very proud of the parents and the kids that are here. And the next time we're going to make you more proud, both of you. We'll probably do it in the basketball thing down below with hundreds of parents. Because because all of you are going to share what was just heard here. Now, Sam, share yours. Thank you for your time.
Please hang out. There's plenty of food for you. Any questions specifically?